When a furious billionaire's $4.2 million car broke down, no one dared to step forward, except a homeless man. But what he said and did next left the entire crowd frozen in disbelief. Stay tuned, because you are about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. The evening had just begun in the heart of the city. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as the sun slowly sank behind tall glass towers. The streets buzzed with activity. Cars lined up at traffic lights, people hurried along the sidewalks, and the sound of horns and chatter filled the air. At the far end of the street, near an old bus stop where the paint had peeled away, sat Malcolm. He was in his early 40s, with tired but sharp eyes that told the story of a man who had seen much more than most could imagine. His hair was messy, his beard uneven, and his clothes were worn thin. A faded jacket clung to his shoulders, shielding him from the cool breeze. Though life had been cruel, Malcolm had not lost his calm spirit. He sat on a broken wooden crate beside a flickering street lamp, quietly sipping from a paper cup of coffee a kind passerby had given him earlier. Around him, people walked by without a second glance. Some even crossed the street, unwilling to come close to a man who looked so poor. But Malcolm was not watching them. His attention was on the flow of cars. He had always loved machines, the way engines purred, the rhythm of gears, the heartbeat of every moving part. Even now, though he had no garage, no tools, and no place to call home, he still listened to engines like a musician listens to notes. Then it happened. A loud roar split the air, followed by a harsh screech. Heads turned instantly. Down the boulevard, a silver hypercar, sleek, powerful, and worth millions, came to an abrupt stop. Steam poured out from under its hood, hissing like an angry dragon. The once smooth sound of its engine had turned into a harsh rattle. The crowd nearby gasped. This wasn't just any car, it was the kind of car people only saw in magazines or movies. A $4.2 million machine, polished to perfection, now sat helpless and broken in the middle of the street. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a man everyone recognized. Mr. Donovan Steele, one of the city's richest and most feared billionaires. His name alone carried power. Owner of a massive tech empire, known for his ruthless deals and impossible standards. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with slicked-back blonde hair and a tailored suit that screamed authority. A deep red tie hung perfectly against his white shirt, but his face was filled with pure rage. He slammed the door shut and kicked the front tire. "Useless," he shouted, his voice booming across the street. $4.2 million for this piece of junk, and it breaks down in front of everyone. The people on the sidewalk whispered. Some pulled out their phones to record the scene. Others just stood frozen, too afraid to get close. Donovan looked around wildly, as if daring someone to laugh at his misfortune. He tugged at his tie, cursing under his breath, his face red with fury. He shouted again, his voice echoing. "Where are the so-called experts? Where are the engineers who built this garbage?" Malcolm watched silently from his crate. Unlike the others, he did not fear Donovan's anger. He did not pull out his phone to record. Instead, he noticed the smoke, the sound of the misfiring engine, the smell of leaking fuel. To him, it was not just a broken car, it was a puzzle, a machine crying out for help. He set his cup down, stood up slowly, and took a step forward. The crowd parted slightly as the ragged man approached. Whispers followed him. Where is he going? Does he want to get yelled at? Look at his clothes, what can he do? But Malcolm kept walking. His eyes were not on the crowd, not even on Donovan's furious face. His eyes were on the wounded machine. And when he finally stopped a few feet away from the billionaire, his voice was steady, calm, and certain. "I can fix it." The words were simple, but they cut through the noise of the city like a knife. The crowd went silent. Donovan turned slowly, disbelief and insult flashing in his eyes. And in that tense moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Step away," Donovan said. His voice was low but hard. "You'll scratch the body with those hands." Malcolm did not move. "I won't touch the paint," he replied, calm as rain. "I only need the hood." A few people in the crowd snickered. A teenager lifted his phone higher to record. A bike courier, waiting at the light, paused with one foot on the curb and watched. The hypercar kept hissing. A sweet smell, coolant, hung in the air. Donovan tugged his red tie and barked, "Security." No one came. He had left his bodyguard at the hotel 5 blocks away. This was supposed to be a short drive. It was not supposed to be a scene. Malcolm pointed once, not touching anything. "Look at the steam," he said quietly. "It's rolling from the right side, not the center. Your cooling line on that side is loose, not broken. The engine is still safe if you act now." Donovan narrowed his eyes. "You read that from steam?" "And from the sound," Malcolm added. "Your turbo is spooling unevenly. Hear the thin whistle behind the rattle? That means the wastegate hose is leaking air. Your computer is dumping extra fuel to protect the engine. That's why it smells rich." The courier lifted his brows. A small boy at the front of the crowd tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, he sounds like the car doctor," he whispered. Donovan's pride pushed back. "Do you have any idea what this car is?" he snapped. "It costs more than your entire life." "I know what it is," Malcolm said. "And I know it's about to get worse if you keep yelling instead of opening the hood." A traffic officer waved from the corner. "Sir, you need to clear the lane," she called. "Either move the vehicle or fix it fast." The billionaire looked from the officer to the crowd, then down at the glowing red temperature warning on his dashboard. Heat climbed his neck. He hated being told what to do, especially by a stranger who slept under a street lamp, but time was running out. Donovan flicked the hood release with a sharp click. 2 minutes, he said. "Touch the body and you're done." Malcolm dipped his chin once, the first sign of relief on his face. He stepped to the front of the car and lifted the hood carefully by the edge of the latch, keeping his fingers clear of the paint. Heat rushed out. Steam curled into the cool evening air. He leaned in, eyes scanning like a scanner at work. No panic. No wasted motion. "There," he murmured. He pointed to a thin black hose that had slipped halfway off its metal nipple. The clamp had walked itself loose. Beside it, a plastic quick connect on a small coolant line had rotated out of position. "I need one simple tool," Malcolm said without looking up. The bike courier clicked his tongue, then rolled forward. "I've got a mini multi-tool," he said, pulling it from his pocket. "Flathead, small pliers." "Perfect. Thank you," Malcolm said. He took it with care, as if it were made of glass. He pinched the hose, slid it fully onto the fitting, and tightened the clamp with 2 quick turns of the flathead. He pressed the rotated connector until it clicked. He then reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin zip tie, old but strong. With 2 neat motions, he looped it around the hose and the bracket to keep the line from walking loose again. Donovan watched, arms folded. "You're guessing," he said, but his voice had lost some heat. Malcolm shook his head. "I'm listening," he replied. He wiped a bead of coolant with the edge of his sleeve so it wouldn't drip onto the belts. "Listen now," he said to Donovan. "When you try to start, the idle hunted. The car coughed. That means extra fuel. The computer reads too much air. This loose hose is why." He leaned farther in and spotted a leaf wedged near the airflow sensor at the intake mouth, small, brittle, almost invisible in the shadows. With 2 fingers he plucked it out and showed it to Donovan without a word, then set it aside on the ground. Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's really doing it." Another person lowered their phone, forgetting to film. Malcolm checked the coolant cap. It was not broken, only cross-threaded from a rushed fill. He loosened it half a turn to release trapped pressure, then reseated it gently until it seated true. The hiss softened. "Hand me that rag," Malcolm said. The courier passed him a small cloth from his bike bag. Malcolm wiped the area clean, checked the lines again, then stood up and closed the hood with both hands on the latch, lowering it softly so the body never felt his touch. He gave the multi-tool back to the courier with a grateful nod. "Thank you." Donovan looked from Malcolm to the car and back again. He tried to hold on to his anger, but curiosity had already climbed into the driver's seat. "Are you finished?" he asked.
For now, Malcolm said.
"It's a field fix. It will get you out of the street. After today, a proper shop should replace that clamp and inspect the hose. But the engine is safe." The traffic officer stepped closer. "Sir, can you move the vehicle now?" Donovan hesitated, jaw tight. He did not like owing anyone anything, least of all a man the world would ignore. But the faces around him were waiting. So was the flashing red warning on his dash. Malcolm stepped back from the bumper and met Donovan's eyes. There was no challenge in his look, only quiet certainty. "Start it," he said. Donovan slid into the driver's seat. His hand hovered over the start button. The crowd leaned in. Phones rose again. The officer held her breath. Even the courier stopped rolling his front wheel. The city seemed to pause as Donovan's thumb pressed the ignition. For a brief second, the tension was so thick you could almost hear the crowd's heartbeat. The engine coughed once, sputtered, then roared to life. But this time, it was not the sickly, uneven rattle from before. The sound was smooth, steady, like the deep breath of a beast waking up after a long rest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The courier, who had lent his tool, grinned wide. The small boy at the front clapped his little hands. Even the traffic officer, who had been ready to call a tow truck, let out a surprised laugh. Donovan froze in the driver's seat, his hand still on the start button. His blue eyes darted to the gauges. The temperature warning had vanished. The idle was calm, the revs smooth. It was as if the car had never broken down. Slowly, Donovan stepped out of the vehicle. His shoes clicked hard against the pavement. He circled the car once, scanning it for scratches, for flaws, for anything to prove the man had failed. But the body gleamed as perfect as before. No dirt, no scuffs. Just flawless silver under the city lights. The billionaire turned sharply toward Malcolm, his voice cutting through the murmurs.
Who taught you that?
Malcolm's expression did not change. His rough beard shifted as he spoke with quiet certainty. I taught myself. Years of engines, machines, sweat, and failure. I know them better than I know people. The crowd leaned in, eager for Donovan's response. But the billionaire's pride burned inside him. He could not admit, not here, not in front of cameras, that a man in rags had saved his multi-million-dollar masterpiece. You were lucky, Donovan said stiffly, his words edged with ice. Any fool could have tightened a clamp. The courier laughed under his breath. Yeah, right. The people around didn't hide their murmurs this time. They had seen what happened. Malcolm had not guessed he had diagnosed, fixed, and restored what no one else could. The crowd's respect shifted. The man who moments ago was invisible now stood like a quiet giant. Malcolm wiped his hands on his jacket, leaving dark streaks across the fabric. He did not rise to Donovan's insult. His calm voice cut deeper than anger ever could. Engines don't care how much money you have. They care if you listen. A hush followed. Those simple words carried weight. They were not just about cars. They were about life. Donovan opened his mouth but stopped. His pride chained his tongue. Instead, he pulled out his sleek black wallet and withdrew a thick bundle of bills. He walked forward, thrust the cash at Malcolm, and said coldly, "Take this. Don't ever say I never rewarded you." The crowd gasped at his harshness. But Malcolm did something no one expected. He looked at the money, then back at Donovan, and shook his head. With steady hands, he pushed the bundle back toward the billionaire's chest. I don't fix things for pity money, he said. I fix them because I know how. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar of the engine. The crowd's eyes widened. Donovan's hand trembled slightly as he held the cash, his pride wounded more than his car had ever been. And in that moment, every single person watching knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning of something that would change both men forever. The traffic officer cleared her throat. Gentlemen, she said, softer now, please pull the car to the curb. You're blocking the lane. Donovan exhaled through his nose, slid the money back into his wallet, and snapped it shut. Without a word, he got behind the wheel, eased the hypercar forward, and parked tight to the curb. The engine idled smooth, low, and sure, proof of what everyone had just witnessed. Malcolm walked to the sidewalk and stopped beside the front fender, careful not to touch the body. The courier rolled up next to him. The mother and her little boy came too. A few people still recorded, but most lowered their phones, curious to hear what would happen next. Donovan stepped out, shut the door gently this time, and faced Malcolm. The anger in his eyes had cooled, leaving something harder to admit: uncertainty. "What's your name?" he asked. "Malcolm," he said simply. Donovan waited. "Malcolm?" Malcolm's mouth ticked into the hint of a smile. "Just Malcolm will do." The courier chuckled under his breath. The officer's radio crackled. The city moved around them again, but that small circle of sidewalk felt like a stage. Donovan looked at the car, then back at Malcolm. "How did you know?" His tone was lower now, not sharp, genuinely asking. Malcolm's gaze went to the open street, as if he could still see the engine's breath in the air. "Engines talk," he said. "They don't use words. They use heat, sound, smell, and small changes. Most people only hear noise. If you listen long enough, the noise begins to make sense." "You're a mechanic," Donovan said. "I was an engineer," Malcolm replied. "Machines were my language. I designed air paths and fuel maps. I loved making power feel like silk." He paused, then added, "Life got loud. I lost my place." The crowd leaned in. The little boy's voice floated up from the front. "Sir, did you fix race cars?" Malcolm turned, his face softening. "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes I fix the people who drove them, by making the car less angry." Donovan studied him. "Where did you work?" "A small firm that supplied parts to bigger names," Malcolm said. "We were good. We built fast things that ran cool and clean. Then a contract got pulled, bills piled up, and the doors closed. My family needed me more than I needed pride. I sold my tools. I paid what I could." He looked down at his worn shoes. "When you start choosing between rent and medicine, the ground disappears very quickly." No one laughed now. Even the phones dropped lower, as if recording felt rude. Donovan's jaw shifted. "Medicine for whom?" "My mother," Malcolm said. "She had a stroke. Rehab is slow. It takes patience and money. I had plenty of the first." He lifted a shoulder. "Not the second." The courier swallowed. "Man." Malcolm glanced at the hypercar. "I sleep 2 blocks from here. At night I listen to buses and taxis and try to guess what each one needs. It keeps my mind from resting." He looked back at Donovan. "Tonight your car needed help. So I helped." The words were easy, light even, but they settled deep. The people who had mocked him minutes earlier now stood quiet, their faces changed. Respect had replaced curiosity. Donovan's eyes held Malcolm's. "You refused money," he said, as if testing the shape of the decision. "I refused pity," Malcolm answered gently. "Money is not wrong. But money thrown like a bone makes a man smaller. You asked for a fix. I gave you one. That is even." He said it without anger. In that calm, Donovan heard something he was not used to hearing. Limits, spoken by a man who had almost nothing, yet somehow still had enough to draw a line. A black SUV slid to the curb behind the hypercar. Donovan's bodyguard hurried out, followed by a woman in a navy suit with a tablet in her hand, Elena, his public relations director. She took in the scene at a glance. The crowd, the cameras, the billionaire standing beside a homeless man. "Mr. Steele," she said quietly, "we can move you to the hotel. We'll craft a statement. A minor malfunction, handled by your team. No need for." Donovan lifted a hand, stopping her. He didn't take his eyes off Malcolm. "There was no team," he said. "There was him." A murmur rolled through the onlookers. Elena blinked, recalculating. "Then we can thank a local Good Samaritan on your channels," she tried, professional smile steady. "We'll arrange a donation." Malcolm's smile was kind but brief. "Thank you," he said, "but I'd rather you didn't turn me into a headline for a day. Headlines fade. People stay." Elena lowered the tablet a few inches. She wasn't used to being told no. The traffic officer stepped forward, softer than before. "Sir," she said to Malcolm, "that was good work." If you ever need a hot coffee on my shift, you find me. She tugged a $5 bill from her pocket and then thought better of it, tucking it back. Better yet, there's a service center 2 blocks east. They take volunteers on Saturdays, teach basics, help folks get certified. Tell them Officer Lee sent you. They'll listen. Malcolm nodded. I'll go. Donovan glanced at Elena. She shrugged in a small, helpless way that said, "This part isn't in the handbook." The billionaire looked at the multi-tool in the courier's hand. "You," he said. "What's your name?" "Jay," the courier said. "You helped," Donovan said. Jay lifted a hand. He did the heavy lift. "I was just the pocket toolbox." Donovan took a breath he didn't know he was holding. The heat of the moment had burned off. In its place came something rare for him, reflection. He turned to Malcolm. "One more question," he said. "Why help me? You owe me nothing." Malcolm considered the question carefully. "Because broken things should not stay broken when you know how to mend them," he said. "Because anger makes engines worse. And because the crowd needed to see that help can come from a place they ignore every day." The little boy tugged his mother's sleeve again. "Mom," he whispered, "he's a hero." His mother smiled at Malcolm. "He's a man who knows his work," she said. "That's a kind of hero." A soft wind moved down the street. The steam was gone. The night felt calmer, cleaner. Donovan looked like a man standing on the edge of a decision he had never expected to face on a sidewalk. He straightened his tie, then let it fall loose again. He was famous for fast choices in boardrooms. This one took longer, not because it was hard, but because it was important. "Malcolm," he said, the name steady now. "Meet me here tomorrow at 9. Same spot. If you want something besides headlines and pity, I'd like to talk about work. Real work. No cameras." The crowd stirred, surprised. Elena's brows shot up. Jay grinned openly. Malcolm didn't react right away. He looked at the car, at the street lamp where he slept, at the officer, at the boy, at the man who had arrived raging and now stood almost human. Finally, Malcolm nodded once. 9, he said. "I'll be here." Donovan inclined his head. It wasn't a bow. It was something rarer from him. Respect paid outward. He opened the door and paused, one hand on the roof. "Thank you," he said at last, the words quiet but clear. The crowd heard them. The word hung like a bell tone, simple, undeniable. Donovan slid inside and pulled away. The hypercar glided down the boulevard, a silver line of light. The SUV followed. The circle loosened. People began to talk again, soft, excited, changed. Jay bumped Malcolm's shoulder with the back of his hand. "Coffee?" "My treat," he said. "Mechanics don't run on air." Malcolm smiled, small, real. Coffee would be good. He took one last look at the street lamp that had been his corner, then at the empty space where the hypercar had been. The city felt different than it had an hour ago. Not louder, not softer, just more possible. And as he and Jay walked toward the glow of a tiny cafe, the little boy's voice followed him like a blessing. "Good night, Mr. Fixer." Malcolm didn't turn. He lifted his hand in a quiet wave. Tomorrow at 9 had a shape now. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead did not feel like a dead end. It felt like the start of an engine, steady, warm, and ready to move. The next morning arrived crisp and cool. The city bustled as always, but for Malcolm, the hours felt different. He washed his face in the public restroom near the bus station, brushed his teeth with the last bit of toothpaste from a nearly flat tube, and straightened his faded jacket. He didn't have much, but he wanted to arrive looking as presentable as he could. At exactly 9, he stood under the same flickering street lamp where he had sat the night before. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Doubt crept in. Maybe Donovan had spoken in the heat of the moment. Maybe it was just pride trying to cover shame. Then the low growl of a powerful engine rolled down the street. The silver hypercar pulled up, polished even brighter than before. Behind it, the same black SUV stopped. Donovan stepped out, not in his sharp red tie this time, but in a dark jacket with the sleeves rolled back. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who had finally chosen to listen. "You came," Malcolm said, steady as ever. And so did you, Donovan replied.
His voice held no anger this time.
It was level, measured, almost respectful. They stood face to face. The crowd from yesterday wasn't there, just the two men, the cars, and the morning sun casting long shadows across the street. Why me? Malcolm asked quietly. Donovan exhaled. Because when everyone else saw a broken car, you saw a way to heal it. When everyone else saw this, he gestured to Malcolm's clothes, you saw the problem, not the appearance. I run an empire full of people who know numbers, who chase profit. But I need someone who knows what matters when things fall apart. Malcolm's brow furrowed. You're offering me a job? Donovan nodded once. Not a charity job. Not pity. Real work. My company builds cars, machines, systems. I want you in my R&D lab. If you can hear an engine the way you did last night, you can teach others to listen too. And you'll be paid fairly. More than fairly. The words hung in the air. Malcolm felt his chest tighten. For years, doors had slammed in his face, opportunities stolen by circumstances he couldn't control. And now here stood a door wide open. But pride still whispered in him. He met Donovan's eyes. Why now? Why help me when yesterday I was invisible to you? Donovan's jaw flexed. Because yesterday I thought money made me untouchable. You showed me something my wealth never could, that knowledge, skill, and dignity are worth more than gold.
You didn't need me.
But I realized I need people like you. Malcolm studied him for a long moment. The arrogance that had burned so bright the night before was dimmer now. Behind Donovan's sharp suit and famous name was just a man learning humility. Finally, Malcolm extended his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused from years of work and hardship. Donovan hesitated a split second, then gripped it firmly. In that handshake, something unspoken passed between them, respect. The SUV door opened, and Elena, the PR director, stepped out. She looked at Donovan questioningly, but he waved her off. No press. No cameras. This stays between us for now. Elena blinked, surprised but nodded. Donovan turned back to Malcolm. Come with me. We'll start today. Malcolm hesitated, glancing once more at the old street lamp. The place where he had spent so many nights suddenly felt smaller, less permanent. He nodded slowly. All right, today. They walked toward the car together. Donovan opened the passenger door, not like a boss to a servant, but like one man showing courtesy to another. Malcolm stepped in carefully, settling into the smooth leather seat. For the first time in years, he wasn't sitting on a crate or a bench. He was riding forward. As the hypercar pulled away, the street lamp behind them flickered once more, then went dark, almost as if it knew its time was done. In the weeks that followed, whispers spread quietly in Donovan's company. A new man had joined the labs, ragged when he arrived, but brilliant in ways no resume could explain. He fixed engines others gave up on, explained problems in simple words no textbook could capture, and earned respect not by titles, but by results. Malcolm still lived simply, but now with purpose, with stability. And Donovan? He began to change too. He started listening more, less shouting, more asking. The billionaire, who once mocked weakness, now funded programs for homeless engineers, creating training centers across the city. He never spoke publicly about Malcolm, but those close to him knew. The encounter on that boulevard had reshaped him forever. And Malcolm? When asked why he trusted Donovan enough to take the offer, he only ever smiled and said, because even the proudest engines can be fixed if they choose to be. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you find the story worth watching. If you do, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.